Hi, welcome back to Helping Heather. It's kind of at the end of my evening, and I'm showered and ready for bed, kind of winding down. And I'm just reflecting on my day, but I'm also trying to get the courage up to share more of my story, my life story, my story on um, how just what's happened in my life, the amount of things, the kinds of things that have happened is just so incredible, so much, um, that one thing would be enough to have a story. One thing would be enough to have trauma or miracle or any of that kind of thing happen. And I have a bunch. I have a lot, and I don't know why that is. I am sitting here now. Um, the place I'm at now is going, what was it all for? What's it all for? What am I to do with this? And I think there's other people out there who might be helped in hearing that you're not alone, that lots of really traumatic things can happen to you, and how people react to you when you're dealing with something really huge. I don't know, just sharing what's happened and what I think about it as I reflect. I feel like it would be cathartic for me and helpful for others. I'm not really sure where to begin. Um, yeah. And I mean, I don't know if it's warranted to do a trigger warning, because this is also a journey of my faith. And, and I talk about, uh, Jesus, and I talk about, things that could be construed as abuse or religious, fanaticism, and some things that, uh, were hurtful to me in the church. And if I do share my story, there'll be trigger warnings for suicide and narcissistic abuse. Um, yeah. So I guess, be forewarned, and I will maybe just attempt to start. So the thing is, I guess when you're starting to talk, you want to have, what's the purpose? Do you have it? Because there's just so much. Do you just start when I was born? There's not a lot of relevance there, so I suppose I can skip that part. I had what I thought was a really regular childhood, but of course, everyone does think their childhood is regular, is regular. And so when we get to be older and we start to see other families and get to know other people's lives and things like that, we go, right? So I toted along believing that my life was just regular. I was the oldest of two girls born to my mom and dad. We were a regular family. We started out struggling. I was born in BC, and we lived there till I was in grade 4. So my biggest issue was moving to Alberta, losing all my friends and everything that I knew. But I was already a very anxious little girl, and no one knew that or understood that. I was very underweight, but that followed me from being a 3-pound baby that was born 4 days before my due date with the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. The story goes that I was told, as soon as I could ask or understand, was that my mom was having contractions and tried to wake my dad up, and he had to go and have his shower and get ready, and then he was going to drop mom at the hospital, and the doctor stopped him and said, "No, you need to stay." and I was an emergency C-section, and I was not alive when I was born. Um, the umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck, and every time my mom had a contraction, it was strangling me. And I was revived and put in an incubator, and I lived in the NICU in the incubator for 6 weeks. Somewhere in there, I think I was transferred hospitals. So my first ever ride outside of the hospital was in an ambulance. Take note of that, because I become an EMT later on. It's my first career. So I thought that was interesting. And I didn't connect the dots of that until after I'd already been an EMT and was looking through my baby book, and I saw the date and all that. Anyway, I guess I won't. Anyway, so yeah, so that's the story. My dad was not very kind to my mom. My mom was very upset. She felt guilty. They also tried 7 years to have me. They had been married for 7 years and they couldn't have me. So she was very, very upset. And she had some extreme postpartum depression that started with me. And she never did recover from it. Depression was with her and dogged her whole life from that point on. And it's what killed her later on too. So yeah, I was in the NICU. My mom tried but couldn't nurse me very much because she was discharged a few days later and then had to keep going back and forth to the hospital. I was not really told too much about how often she visited or any of that, but I'm sure there was a disconnect. And my grandma said I was a very ugly baby. I was ugly when I was born. That's another thing and that's my mom's mom that said that. And I guess about that time frame, years later, when I was a full-on adult with my own first daughter, I learned that my mom and dad separated when I was about 3 months old, coming home from the hospital, and my mom took me and went to Whitehorse to stay with my grandparents, because that's where they were living, in Whitehorse, for a while. And that's because of some sort of affair, or my dad cheating on her somehow, whether it was full-blown cheating. I have an inkling that it was not all the way, but enough to make my mom mad, but whatever. And one of my dad's friends was with him and called my mom in Whitehorse and said, "You better come home. Jack's not doing good." And she did. And their relationship wasn't the best from my mind, right? I mean, when they're younger, they had more spunk and they were funny and they would fight a little bit, but there was affection and going out and going on dates and things like so. To me, that seemed normal. And I never was aware growing up that had happened, right? So my dad called me Princess and called my sister Mouse. And even though we weren't well off at all, we had the things we needed, and my dad actually arranged for us. I didn't know this. I learned this as an adult, that my dad actually asked his parents for money all the time for Christmas and birthday gifts so he could get us the very best things. Because even living in BC, I remember I got Rainbow Bright and we got She-Ra, even like the big dollhouse with all the different characters. We had Barbies, we had all kinds of stuff, My Little Ponies and Pound Puppies and all the coolest stuff. We had bikes and things like that. So to me, I had a Cabbage Patch doll. Yeah, life was regular kind of thing. So, but once school hit, and anytime anything was off or I was having to go to the babysitter or not be with my mom, specifically my mom, I would be nauseous and throwing up in the morning, and you could not get me to eat till I was back home safe and my mom was there every day, all day. And if I had to go to school, once I started school, I needed to come home for lunch and see my mom. And that's the only time I would eat. I absolutely hated staying at the school for hot lunch, would not eat it, hated it. And it was a big fight. I was stuffing my sandwiches and my food in my desk till it was just putrid and awful. I wasn't the only one doing it. I think I started a trend and other people were doing that too. But I was underweight all the time. And so there was all kinds of food in my house that was unhealthy and I was allowed to eat it. And that was like mostly chocolate was my thing and pure chocolate. Well, now we know chocolate has a lot uh, creates like it gives you magnesium and it helps you create serotonin, dopamine, and calm you down. Like it had a purpose. So that's the thing to know about me. When I was a kid, I loved chocolate. I would not eat till I got home from school, and that was every day. And I was severely underweight, and my parents did not restrict what I was eating. If I wanted it, they gave it to me. And that's, I'm sure, came from the doctor because of being severely underweight. And I think they thought that was the case for me because of being 3 pounds and not expected to live through the night and such a delicate baby. But actually, it was also this anxiety. And unfortunately, I passed that on to my kids a little bit, or they have it too. And but I've learned what it was, and this followed me all the way through high school, all the way. The majority of the time going to school, I did not eat anything until I was home from school. And it's not a routine that I created, it is how I felt. I was so nauseous. There's no way I could eat anything. And I grew out of being nervous to be away from my mom after elementary school. Moving to Alberta, I still was anxious about my mom. But they didn't pick up on it being anxiety. The doctors, nobody, my parents didn't. So it was never addressed. I was like my oldest daughter was 2 years old before I was diagnosed with panic disorder, severe anxiety, and severe postpartum depression. And that's when I started to connect the dots after getting healthy from that. So, and the anxiety and being unable to eat in the morning went away. So I still get that way sometimes, but it's not as volatile anymore. And I've been able to help my daughters through it. So that's good. But I always think, like, why was I so anxious? And perhaps that's another signal that everything wasn't as normal as I thought. And looking back on my childhood, I still feel like, oh yeah, we had love, we had funny times. My dad was the pirate or the funny giant, and he would always take us shopping, and he would do the grocery shopping, and he'd take us to the mall to get out of mom's hair. Mom was quiet and liked to read, and she liked to keep a clean house, and she was working and put dad through school. Like, it just seems like normal, right? But there's probably things in there that were very anxiety provoking for me. And being Gen X too, we were not super protected. And there's certain things I don't fully remember, but I remember not liking this one house that my mom would have us go to. It was her friend Nora, and she had 2 boys. Jeremy was my friend, and then there was an older boy that was his brother that we did not like. He was mean, and all I think about is he being mean, and like not just mean, evil mean. And then the dad was scary, evil, mean. And I remember we had to sleep over one time, and I did not like that. And I just don't remember the sleepover. I didn't like it. And the next morning, she was trying to make pancakes, and the dad came and whacked the pancakes to show that they were full of batter that was raw, and laughed and was just a terror. Did not like him. And I think I made a really big stink of never wanting to sleep over there again or go back there again. Like, we saw the people we saw. I didn't mind Nora, who I called Noni, and then Jeremy, I called Jeremy, and he was my little friend. So I was good with those 2, but I did not like the other 2. And yeah, not really sure what happened there, but that was very anxiety provoking, and having other babysitters and stuff like that. So, but other than that, to me, we had a cat named Fluffy, and We moved to BC in grade four, or moved to from BC to Alberta in grade four. My sister and I both didn't like that, but my dad got a really good job, and he was working in the forestry industry, in purchasing, and it tanked. So we moved to Alberta, where our grandparents both were at the time, when that economy crash in BC started, and my dad got a job in Alberta. We moved there, and he stayed with that company for the rest of his career and worked his way up. So he really enjoyed that. It was a good move for him, and he was able to buy a nice house and move us in. And then, yeah, I guess we did life. And in that house, I really felt our family was normal. I mean, my dad was the oldest of six kids. The first three were boys and the last three were girls. And I never did meet my Uncle Donnie because he died by suicide in high school. And I don't know if I always knew he died by suicide. I just know he died. And then later on, I did learn about it. I asked some questions, and then I was told about it a little bit. So it was my dad, and then his brother, Uncle Gary, and then my Auntie Kathy, Auntie Nancy, and Auntie Carolyn. And on my mom's side, she's in the middle between two boys. Her oldest brother, it was Uncle Terry, and then youngest is Uncle Steve. And out of all these kids, as we were growing, like, I'm the oldest granddaughter on both sides, and the other people, the other cousins are like, then my sister is the second oldest. So yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. We Yeah, we moved, and dad had that job, and life seemed normal. Um, in our both sides of our family, we were the only, I guess, regular family of mom and dad that are married with two kids. Um, some of the aunts and uncles were single parents, and then blended families and things like that, and adopted kids. So it's not like we knew that or thought about it, but looking back, um, there was no like custody or anything like that. So uh, just thought life was regular. And um, my relationship with my dad was pretty good until years later. But some of his statements he'd say, like when I wanted him to spend more time, I wanted him to teach me to fish. I wanted him, he taught me how to drive a bit and things like that. But he said, I do more with you if you're a boy. And he really didn't invest in my sister or I. Like, we have kids, and I'm talking to them about what they want to do for a career, and what kind of classes they should focus on depending upon what they've answered, and kind of helping them dream. Well, my mom or dad never really did that with us. Neither of us. It's like that's not something they wanted from us. My mom didn't really go to school for anything. She she always worked in the medical field and administration, or like doing some typing up charts. She was a really fast typer. And she put my dad through his 1 or 2 years of NATE for him to be getting his certificate. So an education for us wasn't anywhere near on his mind, but he was making good money. They had a good house. So the fact that he didn't dream about us, I'm sure that if he had a boy, he would have dreamt for us about what to be. So, so very little talk about, or any talk about what we wanted to be or do um, when we grew up. And I was reflecting because it's getting to the point, um, you know, let's see, March. So local girls' grad dresses are coming in, and kind of they're talking about that. our youngest isn't graduating till next year, so um, I'm just kind of observing this. But I remember I went shopping with my mom at the mall, and she said she couldn't afford to buy me the grad dress, and I said that's okay. And I had in high school, I worked 3, 4 jobs. I started working when I was like 14 years old, or that. And before that, I babysat. So I had always had money, and in like grade 10, 11, 12, I worked at a gas station and at Wendy's, and then on the weekends, sometimes I would work at Domino's. So I was always working. And when I worked at Wendy's, I worked on the West End. We lived in St. Albert, and so I worked in the West End of Edmonton till 3 in the morning. The drive-thru was open, and I would have 3 or 4 of those shifts a week. And I actually set my schedule in my high school so that I would have spares in the morning so that I could take those shifts and those closing shifts. I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do with the money I was saving, but I had lots of it. For somebody that's a teenager back then, I mean, I went clothes shopping, but I wanted for nothing. And I remember before I got the job, my parents would say, like, okay, if we're buying your clothes, Zellers and Walmart is where we're buying it from. If you want name brand clothes, you have to buy them yourself. That's one of the reasons I got a job, was so I could buy, some better clothes and things like that. And because babysitting money wasn't that much. Yeah, so I bought my own clothes. And my sister never got a job, so they actually bought her name brand clothes because they weren't buying my clothes. And just, well, my sister's a whole other story. Being younger, I was expected to take care of her. And now I think I'll have to do another video going back on that. I'm just going to kind of outline what happened, overview kind of thing, so you get the vibe. And so, yeah, so I was looking after paying for my own self, and my parents let me use their Ford Taurus. And then when I got my driver's license, I was paying for the fuel and the insurance, and then I had to drive my sister wherever and pick up her friends on my own gas and my own dime. And I never thought anything of it because I was just a generous person, right? And I bought my sister things and stuff like that as well. But looking back, it's like, huh. So I had money and I saw this grad dress. I wasn't somebody who needed super name brand things and grad dresses. I didn't realize people were gonna go all out. I went to this one shop, like maybe like the first or second shop I'd been in, and I saw this beautiful forest green velvet off the shoulders dress. And I tried it on. It was my size, and I was skinny, like we know. And my mom liked it. I said, "This is my grad dress," and she's like, "Well, I can afford to buy it because it's only $100." And I was like, "No, no, I'll buy it." And then I think I got my hair done, and I paid for that too. Did my own makeup and all of that, but it's so weird that my mom would say she couldn't afford to buy a grad dress because they had tons of money. My dad made 6 figures. And so I thought that was weird, but I never had asked her to do that. I just wanted her to come shopping with me. So, I was working the 3 jobs when I graduated high school, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I just continued working. And, my friends really didn't know what to do, so we were just, hanging out, having fun when we weren't working. And then one of my friends was going to be a firefighter and an EMT, and he showed me his book, and I thought, I could do this. This looks good. But I mean, I was like maybe not even 100 pounds when I graduated high school. And so I thought, well, if I have to lift people, I'm going to have to gain muscle. So I started going to the gym and I talked to my parents about this career option being an EMT and ambulance attendant and like emergency medical technician. My dad's like, you can't do that. You can't lift anything. You're not smart enough to do that. Yes, he did say that. And I said, well, I'm going to do it. And my mom's like, we can't afford to pay for your school. I said, I got money. I'll pay for it myself. And so I did. I paid for every penny of, and it's not just you go to college. So you have to do some basic life support classes and, there's prerequisites. And then there was like less than yet 1 year EMR certificate I did first, which was in St. Albert. And I've completed that. And you have to buy this, your gear um, and, then I did the EMT certificate, and my mom was right there helping me do scenarios and scenario after scenario after scenario and help me study, which was great. Those were some great times I remember with her, and she was proud of me. And I was building muscle, and I gained weight of muscle, and I was able to lift. And I think I went from under 100 pounds to 135 pounds to that's muscle, right? And I successfully completed with honors all the courses and began working with ambulance. And I was so happy. I felt so confident and happy. Um, as some of the best times of my life, some of. That feels like a lifetime ago. Anyway, so that was successful. My dad never believed I could do it. And then when I did do it, of course, he's bragging to all his friends and family about how I am an EMT. Uh, yeah. So I guess I'll end it there. So I'm ending it at the EMT thing. And my dad saying, "Oh, you know, I'd teach you if you're a boy," kind of thing. I didn't. Part of me just thought it was a joke, and the other part of me it sunk in. But I only really ever had the conscious level of thinking he's just joking, right? But he really didn't spend a lot of meaningful time teaching or training me or equipping me with anything. I remember I had a boyfriend, Gabriel, and he was a little bit older. Um, and he was Romanian, and I really fell for him. And I thought, you know, that was a. So he invited me to meet his family, and we had dinner together and stuff. And his dad and him were rebuilding an engine, and I was kind of around there. And it was a very sweet family. He had a little sister that was very sweet, but because he was older, he could go to the bar, and I wasn't allowed to yet. And um, I remember this one girl, Cynthia, was flirting with him, and his friends were telling me, and me and her had like a little bit of an argument about it, and he didn't seem fazed. And then one day, him and his dad approached me, say they wanted to talk to my dad, and I was like, okay. And so I told my dad that they wanted to talk to him. He said, okay, yep. And he said, I'm going to teach you something, Heather. And I said, okay. So, knowing what my dad said in the past about, yeah, if I was a boy, he'd teach me more, I took note. He's going to teach me something. So he met with Gabriel and his dad, and they asked him for money and said they had this business venture they wanted to do. My dad said, yeah, do you have anything for collateral? And I guess he had the stereo. So dad said, okay, bring the stereo over here. And so he did. He brought the stereo over, and it was ours as collateral for the loan. It might have been like $1,500, which was a lot of money back then. And my dad said, yep, I'm going to teach you something. So anyway, gave them the money, and we kind of continued on the same as normal for a little short while. And it wasn't even It was maybe a week or two later, and I get a phone call from him, and he says, "Yeah, we're we're traveling to, and I can't remember, somewhere in the States." And I said, "Oh, okay." He says, "Yeah, well, I have a friend here that's a girl that I need to go talk to, so here you can talk to my sister." I was like, "What?" So talking to my sister, and so I said hi to her and everything, and that's about it. And that was the last time I talked to him on the phone. They completely moved, and I was heartbroken. He didn't tell me nothing. And then his friends came to say they were supposed to have the stereo. He said they had said he said they could have the stereo. So when my dad was gone, I gave the stereo to them, not being confused, like not understanding what's going on. And my dad was mad. He said that was supposed to be his because of the collateral for the money. Turns out him, Gabriel and his dad had asked all his friends for money as well, and then they had moved and left. And my dad said, "Yep, people are always going to use you." And I was like, he says, "That's the lesson, Heather." So that was like pretty big heartbreak for me. Um, yeah, I don't, I guess, yeah, not a very good experience. That was my second ever boyfriend, and the first one also dumped me, and so it was not a very good first two experiences. And yeah, I just um, that was before I graduated. I think I would have been 17 years old. I had my first boyfriend when I was 16. So it wasn't very good, but at least my dad, I guess, did teach me something at that point. I don't really recall my mom around at that time. I don't. So I'm sure she was there, but I don't have any memory of her giving me hugs or being part of that. So, um, yeah, you know, that was a sad part. Being an EMT was a good thing. And that was a few years later, like when I was 19, 18, 19, 20, somewhere around 18, 19, 19 years old, 20. That's about when I started that whole thing. And I graduated, I think, at 18 years old, or just 17 to about to turn 18. So I might have been 16 when I dated Gabriel. I think I might have been actually. Yeah. So anyway, that was just, yeah, a little glimpse of what my dad would teach me. And my mom would play cards with me and my friends and hang with us and games and whatever. And my house was kind of the place that everybody wanted to hang out at. Um, so yeah, so to me that all felt normal, and I didn't really see any cracks until I got to be older. Because when you're young and a teenager, you're kind of self-focused, right? And you think everything's kind of regular. So I will kind of end it there for this video, up to being, I'd say, around 20 years old, being an EMT. Um, Actually, just becoming an EMT. So I'm going to say 19 years old. And then I'll pick it up again tomorrow because my trazodone is kind of kicking in. And so thank you for listening. So far, I guess at this point, my mom and dad didn't really have any faith in God or anything that was, um, we didn't go to church, didn't really talk about God. I remember asking my mom when I was little if she believed in God. And she says, nope. And I said, do you believe in heaven? She goes, no. And I said, what do you think happens when you die? And I remember she said, I think that's just it. Nothing. You don't go anywhere. You just stop. And I remember feeling so upset, viscerally upset as a kid. And that's probably, that right there is probably why And I'm just thinking, I think that might have been when anxiety started about my mom getting a little teary. I think that's probably when it started because, yeah, I was very little when I asked that question. Under 5 for sure. And I just got so upset. And I probably thought, if my mom dies, she's gone. I was so upset about that. I guess as I'm heading to bed, I got a little bit of a revelation there. Not, that's probably it, hey? So that's one time I asked a question and got that answer. I think I asked my dad if he believed in God, and he said no, he was mad at God because his dad was very mean to him and beat him up when he was little, and his brother died. So he was mad at God and didn't believe in him. And my dad maintained that his whole life. So I think also my mom was forced to go to church and she refused to do that. And I think she was forced into being the only girl in the family. Her mom had her doing all the kitchen work and cleaning, and her brothers were able to get away with that. So I think that really stuck in her craw. So she didn't, teach or push myself or my sister to learn how to cook or clean or do anything. She usually did it all for us, did it all. She was picky about her house and wanted to keep it clean and decluttered. She was a big introvert and quiet. So that's, I think, where that came from, is clutter really bothered her and she got migraines. So she was sensitive. So she wanted her environment to be kept in a way that limited those issues for her. And that's why I think what motivated her to keep things clean and tidy and smelling nice and all of that. So she did all that work. And when I asked her, like, can I help with the kitchen or can you teach me? She goes, it's just easier if I do it. And so there was a mix of just wanting to get it done and not to invest in that moment and into me. And I think there's also a stance, I could be projecting, but I think there's a stance against, if I teach you and get you really good at doing this, then you're just going to take that over. And there's got to be a change where women aren't the only ones being the domestic laborers. She was very upset about that in her life. And yeah, so I'll leave it there that I was not raised with really any set of values or morals necessarily. My sister got away with all kinds of stuff, and weren't really disciplined that much, or trained in any sort of way. I just spent hours reading when I was at home, and you'd have your 3 square meals a day, and maybe 2 of the 3 I was getting for myself as I got older. But there's lots of food in the house to pick from when you were home. And after school, I would get a snack or 2 and then have supper and then eat into the evening if I was hungry or whatever. I was allowed to go with my friends and do whatever. My mom really didn't know where I was, what I was doing. And when I got home, it's not like I went and talked to her and told her. Maybe I might have had a little bit of a visit, but typically she might have been sleeping or watching TV with Dad. So then I would just go up to my bed. That's kind of life. But I think it could have been an intentional stance against a lot of that. Like, I was like 12, 11 years old when I started smoking, and they both smoked. So I just steal cigarettes out of their packs. And then when I remember smoking and going, this is bad. I'm like, oh, yuck. And then like the next day doing it again. Shouldn't have done that. It was bad. And I remained smoking until I was in my 20s, almost 30. Because of course you get addicted. And when they found out I smoked, I might have been 13. I wasn't slick, so people caught me doing things. They just let me smoke. And, very permissible household kind of thing. And I think that was intentional and also a bit of neglect too. It's kind of neglect it is neglect if you're not teaching and equipping your kids to function as adults. And if you're not calling them out to study, teaching them and equipping them, that is neglect. And being permissible is also neglect. So I'm glad nothing serious I'm sorry. Yeah. Nope. Serious things did happen to me. Yeah. Anyway, I will leave it there. I guess some more context because, um, at that point, I think that I kind of talked to God a little bit in my own. I just knew it didn't feel good to think. And that stuck with me. Like I did think about that over my life. Like my mom saying there's nothing and just done. Uh, and then when I was in high school, friends of mine wanted me to come to church. So I said, Mom, I want to go to church. And she would let me go to the United Church. And that's very interesting because they're more permissible. They're not as strict. So I don't know if that's the one my family line went to. There's nobody around to ask anymore if that's kind or if she chose that because she knew. I don't know. So I went a couple times, but I didn't really learn much. We washed each other's feet and ate pita bread, and I knew nothing about that. I didn't know why. Could not explain why. Like, I, yeah, that's the rest of that's a story for another day. So, thank you for sticking out with me, and I hope, um, yeah. I don't know if you're seeing patterns in what I'm describing. Comment down below if you resonate, if your childhood was similar. I don't know. Just comment if you feel like it. Okay.